Joining us right now is retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel and former Florida Congressman Alan West. Good to see you, Colonel. Thanks so much for being here.
Good to be. Good to be with you, Maria.
What do you make of this? Is this propaganda at play? What's going on in terms of Facebook shutting down these accounts with more evidence, they say, of tampering?
Well, we know that the Russian internet research activity is still continuing on with their shenanigans. I think it's very Pavlovian when you don't admit or don't understand that there's bad behavior out there and you allow it to continue to permeate. We've got to shut down. We have to be very serious about our cybersecurity. And I think one of the key things that the United States of America has to do, we have to get offensive-minded when we look at these intrusions into our cyber world, being it through the internet and being how it can affect our political systems.
So is there any way to stop it?
Oh, yes. Of course there's a way to stop it. I think we need to be able to track these individuals back to their home nations and put the right type of pressure on those countries. We know that a lot of this is tied back to Russia and also to North Korea. And so there are many different ways, there are many different tools that the Trump administration can use. But I think when you had the Department of Homeland Security Director Kirstjen Nielsen up there recently in New York, and they were talking about cybersecurity and the threats that it is to our homeland, we need to go, like I said, offensive in nature now.
Good morning, Colonel West. This is Morgan Ortega. Speaking of what Kirstjen Nielsen said yesterday, Vice President Pence actually made some very pointed remarks about cyber and said under the Obama administration that there were so many attacks that went unchecked. And he actually seemed to imply yesterday that the U.S. would go more offensive on cyber, said that they were going to hold countries accountable. What do you think that looks like in reality? What is Vice President Pence trying to say that the U.S. is actually going to do?
Well, I think now that we have the United States Cyber Command stood up and you have it in the Air Force and the Army respective at the sub levels, you know, we need to be able to go at these countries and we need to be able to go at these sources, because if we don't, we continue to allow them to get better. One of the things that we're starting to see is their tactics, techniques, and procedures are improving. So it's getting harder to be able to detect them. So that's why we have to be offensive and not defensive. We have to not be reactionary, because that's what we have been in the past.
Well, Colonel West, it's Dagan McDowell. However, what about what the United States is doing that we don't see, that we don't talk about? Again, because the narrative, really pushed by the left, quite frankly, is that we're back on our heels and we're being manipulated by Russia and it's all President Trump's fault. However, it's what the intelligence community and even law enforcement is doing behind the scenes. I think about the Stuxnet virus that was planted years ago in one of the nuclear facilities in Iran.
Well, without a doubt, you're going to see the political critics of President Trump try to leverage this against him and tie it back to that press conference with Vladimir Putin. But you're right. There are things that are going on that we don't know about. And as I said, that's why we have the Cyber Command that has stood up. So we do have a military organization that recognizes that this is a new part of the battlefield that we're on.
Colonel, this is Mike Murphy. How much of this comes back? Good morning. How much comes back to the American people? How much comes back to where, when you're on Facebook, you're on social media, you should have some understanding of what you're reading and don't get caught up in this type of propaganda coming from overseas?
Oh, Mike, I mean, you just hit the nail on the head. We have to be more circumspect ourselves, and we have to be more responsible as individuals, and that's one of the things that the other side is preying on. You know, back when I was a young cadet going through training, the drill sergeants used to call us stuck on stupid every now and then. And we need to have people that stop being stuck on stupid out there and realize that they're being manipulated. So there is an individual responsibility. We can't just sit around and say the government has to come in and fix everything for us. God gave each and every one of us a brain, and we need to use it.
Yeah, well, it certainly is a new era out there with regard to privacy and younger people not caring what's out there. Let me switch gears, ask you about North Korea this morning. A ceremony on the Korean Peninsula. Dozens of Korean War veteran remains prepared to make the journey home to Hawaii. Vice President Mike Pence will greet them in Hawaii. Here's what he told me about that when I interviewed him on Friday.
President Trump has asked me to do many things on his behalf as vice president, but frankly, I've never been more humbled or more honored to be asked to represent him as the remains of American heroes from the Korean War arrive back on American soil.
Yeah, the vice president, of course, is very emotional about this. His father fought in the Korean War, got the Bronze Star, Edward J. Pence. Your thoughts on this ceremony this morning and what this means?
Well, it's an incredible thing. You know, I served in the Army for 22 years, and I spent 1 year on the DMZ in 1995 in South Korea with the 2nd Infantry Division. And this is an incredible closing of a chapter for so many American families. Hopefully we get these remains identified. It gives them that closure. And as a service member, our POWs and MIAs, we must continue to fight for them, for their recognition. But we also must stay vigilant with North Korea. This is a great gesture that Kim Jong-un has made. But we also know, based upon satellite imagery, they're still up to the same chicanery with their nuclear missile development and testing with those ICBMs.
Yeah, I mean, we don't. There was one dog tag in the 55 remains. You think we will be able to identify these remains?
Well, I tell you, based upon the new technology we have with DNA identification, we'll be able to do, I think, better than we could have years prior. But again, we want to make sure that this is not a hoax because we are acting on good faith that these are remains of Americans coming back home. And you have so many family members that are hanging on the edge to get some good news.
Yeah, so what is it going to be for you in terms of getting an understanding of where North Korea is at in terms of whether or not they're telling the truth or if they really are just, you know, going along about this whole, well, yeah, denuclearization, but it really won't be done. I mean, what's your take on how serious they really are here?
Well, without a doubt, I think North Korea is trying to draw this thing out. North Korea understands the political situation here in the United States of America, and they're probably hoping that President Trump is not successful in the midterm elections and everything shifts away from them, which I don't think will happen. So I believe that we need to have a very strict and very tight timeline. We need to get people on the ground there in North Korea to verify what is happening.
Yeah, I wonder if we're going to be able to verify, though. What do you think?
I think we're already making positive steps in that direction. I mean, the fact that whether this is symbolic or not, I mean, it matters to a lot of people. So I think where we were with them a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we're making progress. So you'd like to think that it's going to continue.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Keep the hammer down on the sanctions, though. President Trump reiterated that we're doing that with Russia, and if they don't step up, more sanctions, quite frankly, and to make sure that China isn't allowing cheating, which it seemed like that China, right after that summit, earlier this year, that China was even allowing cheating that soon.
And is China basically pulling the strings here, Alan, in terms of using that as leverage for the trade spat?
Well, that's the thing that we have to play chess and not checkers. We have got to put the pressure on China because if you put the pressure on China, you isolate North Korea and you force the hand of Kim Jong-un. So that's why I'm glad to see that the president is laser focused on China, their theft of our intellectual property, their forced transfer of our technology, all the things that they have done in rebuilding their military. We see what they're doing in the South China Sea. That's really where we have to be focused on is China.
All right, we will watch that. Alan West, good to see you, sir. Thanks so much.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you,
so much.